Welcome to Immigration Insider with your host, attorney John Nicelli. This podcast is an educational forum on how to deal with complex aspects of immigration and pitfalls to avoid. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, johnnicelli.com. Now here's the host of Immigration Insider, attorney John Nicelli.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Nicelli. I'm an immigration attorney for over 40 years. I practice here in New York City, in downtown Manhattan, and I do exclusively practice in the field of immigration. We do absolutely nothing else. We do litigation, we do employment-based immigration, family-based immigration, anything related to immigration, we do it. If we haven't done it, probably doesn't exist, to be quite honest with you. So today, I do these podcasts and I speak about different very important issues in immigration. And today I want to speak about a program which was started in the Biden administration approximately 2 years ago, which has now been canceled. So the program was known as Humanitarian Parole. And what the Biden administration did was they gave a classification of humanitarian parole for 4 countries, which are Venezuela, Haiti, Cuba, and Nicaragua. Now, the reason for the humanitarian parole, there was actually 2 reasons. One is the amount of people that have been crossing the border from these countries illegally, or they go to the border and they want to file for asylum. So they wanted to reduce the number of people that were crossing the border from these countries because the numbers were so high. So they thought a smart way of doing it would be have the people legally enter the country, so it wouldn't overburden the border patrol and all the assets that are needed and detention space and many, many things. So what they decided to do is let's let these people come in and let them stay here for a period of 2 years. So it originally started in October 2022, and then it was extended. So let me double check. It was extended in January 2023, originally for Venezuelans in October 2022. And then in January 23, they extended to Haitians, Cubans, and Nicaraguans. Now, what the program involved is basically you'd have to register at the embassy, say that you're here living in one of these countries, you're a person of good moral character, meaning you don't have any criminal record, and they would allow you basically a visa, a parole visa to enter the United States. So you arrive at any port of entry in the United States, and once you arrive, you have the documents from the consulate or embassy, you present them with your passport, and they would allow you to come into the United States for a period of 2 years from the day you arrived. You also got permission to work. You're allowed to stay here and basically work and do whatever you needed to do and be safe and free. One of the reasons for these programs and this program is because of the situations in those particular countries. There's been hurricanes, there's been earthquakes, there's been political violence, instability from throughout the country. There's violence from the drug cartels. Many, many things affect the reasons why the president or anybody else would offer such a program. So in addition to stopping them from crossing the border illegally, they found that being that some of these really horrible conditions exist in these countries, where there's really destitute poverty for the most part in many of these countries, and really bad crime, serious crime. In fact, the murder rate in Honduras, which has a different type of program, which I'll explain a little later, in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, they have the highest murder rate in the whole world. It's that bad. But they have a different program for Honduras, as I said. So getting back to the Venezuelans, Haitians, Cubans, and Nicaraguans. So these people have arrived in the United States from these countries and are allowed to come here and stay here for 2 years. So now, a few weeks ago, the Biden administration decided to cancel the program. Now, they canceled the program. God only knows what the reasons were. They don't tell us the reasons. They just decided they were going to cancel the program. They allowed these people to stay here for 2 years and gave them an opportunity during those 2 years to try to acquire a lawful status. But for the most part, many of these people did not acquire a lawful status. So the requirement now is that once your parole status expires, which is the time you're allowed to stay here, you must depart the United States. Now, after living here for 2 years and leaving a country that's in turmoil and destitute poverty and crime, whatever you experience there, why would you want to return there? No one's going to want to return to a country that's a disaster when you've been living safely, working with a social security number, and living in the United States and having everything available to you, including medical care. It would be insane, right? So the way it works is that the government will monitor who's here when their status expires, and they will send them a letter that your status has now expired and it's time to leave the country. Usually they tell them to leave within 30 days. Now, if they don't leave, then they would, and immigration knows about it, then they would issue put them in removal proceedings, issue what they call a notice to appear, where you'd have to appear before an immigration judge. So that'll take months down the road because the immigration courts are very backlogged. So when you finally get a date to go to court, which could even be a year from the day you get that letter, you go to the judge, and the judge is going to say, okay, why are you before me, and what is it that you want to apply for? Say, well, judge, my country's in turmoil, for any of those 4 countries. And you'd say, I really don't want to go back. I'm really afraid to go back. So the judge says, well, okay, then I guess you want to file for asylum, or what they call withholding of removal. So as soon as a person hears that, or if they have a lawyer, they're going to say, of course, that's what I want. So once now they're in the system, they'll file for asylum or withholding of removal. Then the judge will give them a date to file their documents. Then you'll go back to court a second time, and we will have what you call an individual calendar date. And that date may be 2, 3, maybe 4 years down the road. So canceling the program didn't get rid of the people. That's number one. So then many of these people will be deported because they don't have bona fide claims for asylum, because the reason why is because you have to have a particular fear of being persecuted in your country. And the difference is that most of these people don't have a particular fear. They have a general fear, meaning that the conditions in the country affect everybody in the country and don't affect you differently. And because they don't affect you differently, you're not going to be granted asylum. But under the system we have, you'll file an appeal of the judge's decision. Now that appeal goes to the Board of Immigration Appeals in Washington. That appeal might take another 2 or 3 years. And God knows what will happen in your life in the next 2 or 3 years. Maybe you'll get married, you'll have children, maybe your whole situation may change. Many, many things could happen. Okay, so the bottom line is, when these programs are canceled, many times it doesn't really result in people leaving the country. They end up staying here for whatever reasons. And many times, even if they have final orders of removal from the Board of Immigration Appeals, what happens is that they'll go to a higher court. In New York, it's a Second Circuit court, challenging the decision that was made. That may take another year of litigation. And here you are now, like maybe 5 or 6 years after the program was canceled, and you're still in the United States. So eventually, you're supposed to leave. Many times people, even with final orders of deportation, they just disappear and they move, they go different places, they change their full identities, and who knows where they are. And it's very difficult for immigration to find them. And as a result, they end up staying here even with no status. But the strange part is they'll have a social security number, and they will continue, even though technically it's invalid because they have no status, they will continue using that social security number. And in reality, they probably won't have a problem because they'll put them on the books. IRS, as far as IRS is concerned, as long as you're earning income, we don't care what your status is. We just want the tax money. So that's another bureaucracy and a bureaucratic mess with immigration. So let me give you some other ideas. Now, let's say you're Cuban. Okay, so you came in from Cuba, and you came because of the conditions in Cuba. You fear of the political situation there, the poverty there, many, many problems in Cuba. I mean, recently the whole country had no electric because it was a power grid failure. I believe it failed twice recently. So that's a problem. I can't imagine living in a country with absolutely no electric whatsoever. I mean, that's a big problem. And they had no phone service. They had no water because there's no water pumps to pump the water through the systems. There's no sewage system working because, again, there's no pumps. You have no heat. You have no light. It's really a terrible situation. But if you're Cuban and now the program has ended, you have no worries. And the reason why is because in 1966, the United States Congress passed what you call the Cuban Adjustment Act. And the Cuban Adjustment Act states, if you entered the United States anytime after 1959, it's that long ago, and you entered the United States after 1959, and you were either admitted or paroled into the United States, now physically present, so in other words, you had some kind of illegal entry, as long as you've been here for at least 1 year, all you have to do is file for adjustment of status. So for every Cuban that entered under the program, this humanitarian parole program, every one of them would be eligible to adjust their status to get a green card unless they have some type of bad criminal record. That's unlikely for the majority of people. So for the Cubans, it's a real win-win situation. Now, what the government doesn't understand, or maybe they do things, they do things without asking people who work in the field, okay? So what they usually do is the politicians consult among themselves, who most of them have absolutely no knowledge of immigration, have no clue what immigration involves. And as a result, they pass these laws that say, oh, this is just a wonderful thing to do, so let's do it. Sounds good. I'll get votes based on this, and that's how they operate, which absolutely makes no sense. So there's another program, which I was mentioned earlier, which affects the Hondurans, okay, and affects a lot of different countries. So if you're from El Salvador, Honduras, or Nicaragua, and there's also a few other countries, but I'm just going to concentrate on those three. Those people, depending on when they enter the United States, the citizens of those countries, they are eligible for what you call temporary protected status. The temporary protected status is basically the same thing as humanitarian parole. The difference is that temporary protected status is something which was approved by Congress and basically gets renewed every year or two. Now, to give you an example, for El Salvador, they just extended it till March 9th, 2025. For Honduras, they extended it to July 5th, 2025. And for Nicaragua, until July 5th, 2025. I would expect around a month or two before those expiration dates, they'll probably extend those dates again, unless the conditions in those countries have significantly changed. The only country that I'm aware of that things have changed fairly significantly is El Salvador, because the president of El Salvador had these massive arrests of drug dealers and criminals, and they've jailed probably thousands of people, and the conditions there have improved. They haven't improved 1,000%, but they have improved fairly significantly. So Congress will reconsider the conditions of those countries when probably around January, February 2025, and then they'll decide if they can extend the designation of temporary protected status to El Salvador. So it's quite unfortunate the way the system works, but immigration is all political. And I keep saying, I listen to the politicians from all parties, not only the Republicans, not only the Democrats, but the conservatives, the liberals, and many, many parties. And they all talk about the border crisis. And they all condemn Kamala Harris for the border crisis. Well, the border crisis, first of all, is not her fault. And it went on during the Trump administration, during the Bush administration, during the Obama administration, the Clinton administration. Every administration, there has been all kinds of problems going back 100 years with people illegally crossing the border. And the reason why they illegally cross the border is because of the conditions that exist in their countries. They don't want to stay there. They want a better life for themselves or their family members. But what's happened recently, and part of the problem with the Biden administration, is so many people have come in and they've applied for asylum. And the reason why they've applied for asylum is not because they have a fear of returning or being harmed, necessarily. The problem is that the smugglers who have bring these people into the United States tell them, just file for asylum as soon as you reach the border, and that's your ticket into the country. So people at the border, they don't know what asylum means. Many of them are illiterate. They have no idea even how to spell asylum. And they come in, they say, I want asylum. Why do you want asylum? Oh, because I'm afraid to go back. Okay. Now, many times the Border Patrol people are so disgusted with what's going on that they don't even ask the people why they're coming here. They just process them because they know eventually, once they speak to some lawyer or some representative, they're going to file for asylum. So the way you stop this is very, very easy. Congress refuses to act. But if Congress would get together on all sides and all parties involved and say, you want asylum? The United States is a haven. We can grant asylum to whoever wants asylum and deserves asylum. However, you cannot file at the border. This is the era of the internet. There is absolutely no reason why an applicant from anywhere in the world can go to their local U.S. consulate or U.S. embassy and say, I want asylum for whatever fear they may have in their country. The consulate can contact the United States and have an asylum officer in the United States electronically and have a video conference call and hear an asylum claim. And so could an immigration judge. We do video conference calls all the time with judges. Every day we have hearings with judges via the internet. There's no reason why a person has to come to the border and file for asylum. Congress has to state, no, you want asylum? You file in the country you live in or the country you pass through. And that's it. No exceptions. That will eliminate the problems at the border. Maybe not 100%, but I guarantee 90%. It'll stop the problem right on its face. Congress refuses to deal with the problem. There was a bill introduced a few months ago. Trump was opposed to everything because he wanted it to be a political football, as Republicans do. They wanted to be an issue for the election, which is an absolute outrage. Okay? They have to get together. They have to tell people, the Congress has to pass the law. If you want asylum, can't do it at the border. You go to the border, expedited removal. We have laws on the books since the 90s called expedited removal. If you get stopped within 100 miles of the border, immigration has the right to turn you around and send you right back to your country and bar you from re-entering for 5 years. They started doing that on some cases, but they haven't done it on the majority of them because all these people come in and say they want asylum. But if you eliminate the ability to file for asylum, you can easily issue expedited removal orders and there'd be no crisis at the border. We don't need to hire more judges. We don't need to hire more Border Patrol people. It's ridiculous the way they're handling the situation. But this is what's going on. It's been going on for many years in all administrations, not only Democrat, not only all administrations that we've had. It's the same problem over and over again because Congress refuses to address the problem. And that is the problem. So with those words, I'd like to say thank you for listening and have a wonderful rest of the year. Thank you.
You've been tuning into Immigration Insider with your host, attorney John Nicelli. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, johnnicelli.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.